So, welcome everybody to Mental Fitness with Fife. That rolls off the tongue like quite nicely there. Okay, Fife.
Yeah,
I'm excited for Fife to sort of show his brilliance. This is his area of expertise and something he feels very passionate about. Am I correct in saying it's rooted in the work of Shameen Shirzad, Fife? And
Shirzad Shamin. Yeah,
Shirzad Shameen, thank you for correcting me, and his work on positive intelligence. And I would say, Doug and Kevin, early days, I used the saboteur assessment in our coaching work. So you may have already
Yeah.
seen it with me, but we didn't go deep. So this is your opportunity to learn a little bit more and for Fife to give you a bit more context and give you a sense of what it is and how it works. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Fife and let him do his thing and quietly exit stage right. So enjoy the session.
yeah. Thank you.
Here, guys.
Let me get my slides going here. Um, so yeah, just to give you a quick overview of what to expect today. We're going to get into what mental fitness is as we define it, or as positive intelligence defines it. We'll get into the three core muscles of mental fitness and how they fit together. One of which is addressing how you self-sabotage. So we'll get into some of that and the science of how you command your mind, which is another component of mental fitness, and what makes this a little bit different from mindfulness or meditation, and kind of weave it all together so you can kind of see how this operating system works. And then we'll hopefully have a bit of time for Q&A if you guys have questions as well. And to start, just an invitation to be present. That's a big part of mental fitness, is allowing yourself and commanding your mind to focus on what you're focused on right now. So if you do find yourself getting distracted or thoughts popping up, just notice that and try and focus on what we're up to today, as that is a component of mental fitness. And to set the context a little bit more, I personally believe mental fitness is kind of the X factor. It's the component that allows for high performance, but also peace of mind. So a lot of things you can have success in areas, but it's costing happiness or peace of mind when it comes hand in hand. And life is inherently challenging. There's stress with relationships, there's stress in work, and everybody's trying to perform at their highest level. And on top of that, even just in the last, we'll say 5 years, we've had a lot of changes around us as well. We had COVID, a lot of changes, especially recently with Trump coming in and tariffs and forest fires. Like, there's all these things that happened around us that we don't really have control over, but impact us and our emotions, as well as just the day-to-day stuff that we have. And the reason I bring that up is mental fitness is a component to navigating those challenges and those things that you necessarily don't have control over as well. And be able to assert some more command over your mind so that you can move through those challenges, whether you have direct control over them or not, in a more positive way. So mental fitness defined is your capacity to handle life's challenges with a positive rather than a negative mindset. So it's super simple, nothing crazy, but it directly impacts pretty much the three main core areas of life, which is performance, peace of mind and wellness, and relationships. So at the heart of it, it applies to all these different situations, which is why I love it so much. It's really applicable and useful once you kind of understand the basic concepts of it. But I'd love just to hear from each of you quickly. What are some of the things that tend to stress you out? And I can pick on somebody if, or go and tell
My
somebody.
my three children stress me out when they're
Yeah,
running and fighting and doing all the stuff. I mean, that adds a huge component.
yeah, yeah. Parenting. What
When
else?
there's too much to get done at work, just things are piling up and you can't get it all done.
Yeah. Overwhelmed with tasks.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else?
I think for me, it's probably even longer, it's bigger picture stuff like longer term career, business thinking and planning. And, I always joke, like, what do I want to be when I grow up kind of idea.
Yeah.
That definitely stresses me out a lot.
Still
Yeah.
lots of time, Doug.
I hope so, Harlan.
Yeah. How about for you, Heartland?
Yeah, I mean, um, I'm trying to think of what like the root of it is. I mean, the last little bit, I've gone through a first lawsuit where we've sued somebody, we won, but now I'm in the collections process, so it's been stressful. And then I don't like it when there's people get upset with, and I think there's this other EO session that I was listening to the other day about taking things personally. And so when people get upset with you, with me in this case, but it's not justified, and so it causes me stress. And I haven't had anything recently, but I know that that's kind of a big button pusher. And there's just some people that you can't control, and you can't satisfy them, and they're not justified in their position. But so that's probably another one. I mean, the rest of the stuff, yeah, there's chaos and stuff going on, and that kind of goes up and down. But I can manage that on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing. And the invitation here is like each of you kind of shared one thing that stresses you out. So just kind of hold that in the back of your head as we move through the rest of this. So you can kind of try and apply where that stress is and how it might fit into using mental fitness to kind of move through that differently. And I always bring physical fitness as an analogy to this. And let's say I surprised each of you with a wonderful gift of signing you up for a marathon tomorrow. How, unless one of you is an actual marathon runner, how would that go for each of you?
It's painful.
Yeah.
It'd be tough.
Yeah.
Might look like this guy. So yeah, when we don't have time for training, usually a lot of pain and suffering. However, if we had been training for a couple of years, really practicing, we'd be conditioned and ready. We'd probably maybe not win the Boston Marathon, each of us, but like it would be a lot more manageable. And both of these people might have read the same blogs, watched the same videos, understood the same concepts, but the guy on the right has probably practiced more. And bring that kind of same idea to mental fitness. Life is going to be throwing marathons at you tomorrow, the next day. Like it throws challenges at us when we don't expect it. And mental fitness, you can cultivate that capacity to handle those challenges and proactively build that over time, so that you're better prepared for it. So where does this come from? Carolyn mentioned positive intelligence. That's where I got certified. And they've built the research foundation behind all this. And it's a synthesis of a couple different domains: positive psych, performance science, neuroscience, and cognitive behavioral psychology. And positive intelligence kind of sits in the middle. So it's kind of drawing on all these different domains to pull together like a really simplistic, we call it operating system, that helps move through all these different challenges or the stresses that you mentioned. And a lot of the research comes from working with CEOs, Stanford students, world-class athletes. They say 800,000 participants. This was a couple of years ago, so that's probably even higher now, from 50 different countries. So it's cross-cultural. This stuff applies in many different places. And there is a book, if you're curious, Positive Intelligence, that's been translated as well. So this isn't something that I've cooked up in my basement. This is something that's been tried and tested in a lot of different places, and a lot of companies are starting to install this framework in their businesses as well. And the reason why it's so foundational and so helpful in so many different situations is they used factor analysis to kind of simplify personal and professional development and get down to the root of what mental fitness is so you can move through these challenges in a different way. Does anybody heard the term factor analysis? No, not really. So a really kind of easy example is colors. So if you want to paint all the different colors or get all the 1,000 different colors that you want, you just need red, blue, and yellow. So when you simplify all the colors down, you get to red, blue, and yellow. And what they did with mental fitness is they kind of looked at all these different domains, all these different aspects, and kind of distilled it down into the simplest form, which resulted in 3 core mental muscles. So there's the saboteur interceptor muscle, which addresses how your awareness of and intercepting how you self-sabotage, both like with your behaviors, but also how you think. Sage, which is once you've kind of caught that self-sabotaging thought pattern or behavior, what do you do next? What's the different way you can move forward that's more positive? And then self-command, which is being able to focus your mind on what you want to focus on, which is a big part of being able to shift from number 1 to number 2. So I'm going to walk through each of these, and it'll be pretty high level, and I'll probably move a little bit faster than I'd like. But again, this is just a chance to get a sense of kind of how these 3 things fit together and how mental fitness works. So for the saboteur interceptor muscle, and some of the names are a little bit funny, like sage and saboteur. So if you get hung up on that, don't worry too much. But there's essentially 2 modes of your brain, which is a very simplistic view of your brain. There's the saboteur side of your brain and the sage side. And the saboteur side of your brain is associated with your brain stem, your limbic system, parts of your left brain, a little bit more of that like fight or flight areas of your brain. Whereas the sage is your middle prefrontal cortex, empathy circuitry, and parts of your right brain. So that saboteur side is a little bit more associated with linear, logical left brain, whereas the right brain is a little bit more creative, curious, that side of it. So there's different parts of your brain that light up when you're kind of in these different modes. And the saboteur side motivates through negative emotions. So when you're in that part of your brain's lit up, it's going to be using fear, anger, frustration, guilt, anxiety, things like that to motivate or like to move through those challenges. Whereas if you're in that sage region of your brain and you're able to tap into that, when you engage in that same challenge, you're tapping more into empathy, curiosity, and those types of emotions. And the saboteur side of us can generate success. I'm not going to debate, like there are a lot of extremely successful people that have achieved pretty incredible things by motivating themselves through negative emotions, but it costs them happiness and peace of mind. Whereas there are people that have both. They have a hugely, highly successful or just success in life, but they also have sustainable happiness that comes with that. And when you're in sage mode, you actually have access to higher creativity and success because you're not bogged down by some of that negativity. And when that negativity happens, it kind of shuts down parts of your brain. So it opens up more possibility. So a really easy way to remember it is Star Wars. That saboteur side is Darth Vader. Sage side is Yoda. So if you need something to remember it, just kind of like think of it that way. I find that to be a helpful kind of thing to stick with. So a saboteur is that voice in your head that generates negative emotions, and often they're really automated patterns. So we just think, feel, and respond quickly. We don't really second guess it. It's just a quick response. And as a result, it causes more negative emotions, frustration, restlessness, doubt, those types of things. So it's like a really automatic pilot response to something happens, and we kind of instinctually just go to that mode of thinking. And there are different ways that we self-sabotage. So they call it the master saboteur. Again, some of the language is a little bit funny, but the master saboteur is the judge, and that's what we use to judge situations, ourselves and others, as wrong or bad. If you're ever using the term should, like, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that, it's quite it's probably that the judge is present, and you're kind of constantly looking for faults with yourself, others, and circumstances. And this is what kind of triggers the rest of the saboteurs. And does that kind of make, I'll kind of pause there because I'm moving fast. Does this kind of land that you can see how there's these different modes of how we judge ourselves and the things around us? Yeah.
Yep.
Judge of circumstances can be a little bit sneaky. Often there's I can't be happy because, or I'll be happy when. Oh, it's raining today. Oh, that sucks. Like, we're judging that circumstance. That's a really simple one. The economy is a certain way. We're judging that kind of situation or circumstance. But sometimes it's these things that we don't have control over that just kind of seem like facts because everybody might agree with us, but we're still judging it a certain way, and it makes us respond and feel negative emotions. And this mode of the judge and how we judge everything and ourselves around us justifies itself. So it'll say, without me pushing you, you'll get lazy and complacent. Without me scaring you about bad future outcomes, you won't work hard to prevent them. Without judging other people, you might lose objectivity and they might take advantage of you. So we kind of justify using negative emotions as a way to protect ourselves, but it doesn't serve us in the long term. So that's like the thing that kind of kicks off. Something happens and we're like, this is bad. And then we move into these different modes of self-sabotage. And there are 9 of these. And this is what, when we send you a follow-up email, there'll be a free assessment that takes about 5 minutes or less. And we'll kind of rank how you self-sabotage in order of what's most relevant to you. There's a controller, hyperachiever, restless, stickler, pleaser, hypervigilant, avoider, victim, and hyperrational. And I won't get into all of these today. When you go through the assessment, they have a really good description of them. And you can kind of move through that in your own time. But I will touch on the avoider because I think it's one that everybody can relate to, and you can kind of see how it interacts with the judge. So the avoider really focuses on avoiding difficult and unpleasant emotions and tasks. And people often know they procrastinate on certain things, or they avoid conflict. Whatever that thing is, there is an archetypal way that we kind of don't want to deal with the unpleasant thing. And the judge lies. So, like, I'll kind of start at the top. So an event happens and the judge lies to you and says, this thing is going to be unpleasant in some way. And whether it's a specific task or dealing with some conflict. And then the avoider kicks in, and to avoid that supposedly unpleasant thing, kind of justifies itself saying, oh, it's not that important, or you can just do it later. And then you procrastinate, you kind of kick it down the road. And as we know, that usually builds and builds and can sometimes blow up in your face, whether that's conflict or a deadline with the task. And the bigger cost with this too is in the back of your head, you're constantly kind of anxious, and because you know you're kicking this thing down the road. So it creates this cycle of stress because you know you're avoiding the thing, and then you're anxious because you should be addressing it. And then the judge comes back in to judge yourself and brings you more guilt because you're not addressing the thing. And then you avoid even more. So it just kind of creates this cycle. And each of these saboteurs kind of works in their own way, but it builds off of that judge in the initial kind of instance. So this is an example of the report that you get, and don't worry too much about the scores when you get them. They'll rank them with an actual score. The bigger thing is just to pay attention to the kind of relative score. So like, what's your top three, and just focus on which one might be creating the most interference for you in your work or your life. So there might be one that impacts you more in parenting. There might be one that impacts you more with overwhelmingly buildup of tasks at work. But you'll kind of see where they're showing up the more you kind of pay attention to them. So I've been talking a lot about negative emotions, positive emotions. Are negative emotions good for you? Is a question that often comes up. And to answer a question with a question, is pain good for you? And this is what I am curious to hear from you, is from each of you, or just a quick raise of hands, like, is pain good for you? Physical pain.
I'm going to say yes, because it allows you to know something's wrong, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's a great signal. Yeah, if our hand's on a hot stove, the feeling of pain is great, because your hand's not going to get burnt to a crisp. You might get a little burn, but you'll take it off quite quickly. The difference with on the mental side is we often just like keep our hand on the hot stove, like emotionally. Guilt, doubt, uncertainty, anger, frustration, whatever it is, we'll just keep our hand on the hot stove for minutes, hours, days, weeks even, before we take it off. And negative emotions are extremely helpful. We need them. They're super helpful, but they're really only helpful for a second. That split second as an alert signal that something's off, that we need to adjust. And when we stay in it and in that negative emotion, we can't see as clearly. We don't respond the way we might want to with empathy or creativity. And that negative emotion is that saboteur side of our brain. I'll kind of pause there, see if there's any questions before I move to the next piece. No. Okay. So now that, again, kind of following the flow, you've kind of caught that you're self-sabotaging. What do you do next? This is just a very high-level view of sage muscle. There's a lot more that goes into this one in terms of strategies to move through and move more into that sage brain. But again, this is the side of the brain that's associated with positive emotions, peace and calm, wisdom and clarity, is often able to see that bigger picture and zoom out. So those times when you need to make a big decision and you're really able to tap into that kind of wiser part of yourself, it can do that. And the sage operates from the sage perspective, which is every outcome or circumstance can be turned into a gift and opportunity, which is kind of the flip side of the judge. The judge is like, this is just bad. This is wrong. There's no good that can come of this. And the sage perspective kind of flips that on its head. It's saying we don't necessarily have to like what's happened, but we're taking an active stance in that we can find some kind of gift or opportunity to leverage for ourselves. Maybe it's a gift of learning. Maybe it's an opportunity that wouldn't have presented itself even if this bad thing hadn't happened. Or it's an opportunity to really grow our mental fitness and our patience by going through that challenge. So it's a very active and proactive approach to how we address challenges. And a lot of the time when I'm working with clients, they'll bring up a challenge like, if this is just really bad, this is a really challenging thing, like I'm just pissed off. And I'll often bring up this question, which usually like irks them. So like, there's nothing good that can come of this. And it might be like objectively like a bad thing, but when you're able to kind of push and prod, you open space to see what might be there. Whether you can see it right away, you create possibility, and maybe you don't see the gift and opportunity right away, but over the next day or two or the next week, if you're really focused on it, you can start to create a gift and opportunity of learning or leverage or whatever it might be. And the two perspectives are that saboteur versus the sage. The saboteur, that this situation's bad, or the sage, which is this is a gift. And which perspective's true? It's the one that that you believe becomes true. So there's a lot more that goes into the sage side of things. There's 5 kind of strategies that we give clients that help them move through specific situations that will help them tap more into empathy or creativity or really active focus, depending on the situation that they're in. But at the heart of it is being active in your choice, that you have some influence and that you want to make a difference and that there might be something there for you. How many of you are familiar with above the line or below the line from conscious leadership?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, very similar, right? Sage is
Mhm.
above the line, saboteur is below the line. And this is just bringing more of like a neuroscience approach to how can you actually start to shift what's happening in your brain when you're above the line or below the line, and how can you actively start to shift above the line when you get hijacked. And one of the core kind of muscles that we flex is the self-command muscle. And I'll kind of guide you through one of the ways that we do that. But before we do that, question for you is, are you in command of your mind? What do you think?
Yes.
Yes? Other
So,
responses?
It's always a work in progress. I think, better now than I was 20 years ago, but it's not perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, in some ways we are, but if we truly had full command of our mind, we probably wouldn't feel fear or stress or anxiety. We would command our mind to focus on what we want to focus on. And one of the ways to move more and more towards having more command over our mind and our focus is what we call PQ reps, which is the kind of, again, going back to that radical simplification of how they got to the 3 mental muscles. They looked at all the different forms of mindfulness and meditation and kind of simplified it down into its like most simple form that's really applicable in different situations. Who here has a meditation practice or a mindfulness practice?
inconsistently.
Inconsistent? Yeah. What, how come it's inconsistent?
That's a great question. It probably is a little bit of when I feel things are going well, I probably put it away. And then I try to resurrect it when things aren't great.
Yeah.
And so I'm probably guilty of leaving my hand on the hot stove for weeks on end and maybe not addressing it. So that's probably the best explanation.
Yeah. Which I've totally felt before. I'm like, things are easy, things are smooth. I don't feel like I need that practice. But again, like using that physical fitness analogy, it's like you kind of need to be doing it all the time to have that capacity on hand. So I'm going to actually lead you through a couple PQ reps. So this is 10 seconds at a time, laser focused on a specific physical sensation. So it is very similar to mindfulness and meditation. The difference is I think it's a lot more actionable in the heat of the moment because it's something you can kind of do anywhere, anytime. So we'll take like a minute or two, and I'll just guide you through a couple different modes of it, just so you can see it at play. And if you have done some meditation, again, you'll kind of see some of the connections to it. But I'll kind of break down how it is different from meditation after. So I'll invite you to just close your eyes for a moment. And start by focusing on your breath. And just place a hand on your stomach. And as you breathe in and out, breathe into your belly, but as you're breathing, pay close attention to the sensation of your hand moving as you're breathing. And as we move through this, if you catch yourself getting distracted by a thought or a sound or anything else, just label it quickly and then return to whatever it is I'm prompting you to focus on. And then shift your attention to the sound of your breath. And then shift to the sensation of air going in and out of your nose. See if you can notice a temperature difference in the air coming in versus going out. And then shift to rubbing a thumb and your index finger or middle finger against each other. And as you do this, just do it slowly. And you're trying to bring enough attention to that sensation that you could try and notice your fingerprint ridges. And if you get distracted, just refocus intensely on your fingertips. And then you can, if you want, you can try and match up your breath with your fingertip rubbing. So when you move your fingers one way, you breathe in. When you breathe out, you slowly move your fingers the other way. And then when you're ready, you can put a big smile on your face and come back. And yeah, what was that like for people? How are you feeling?
It's nice and relaxing, right? It puts you in the moment, makes you calm. It was nice. And my house is quiet right now, so that helps out too. But
Yeah.
it was a nice short practice.
Yeah. What else did people notice?
Yeah, I think just sort of building on what Kevin said, it's nice and simple. Like it's not not that meditation never has to be complex, but it's just, yeah, a couple of simple things. But there's enough adaptation to it. It kind of forces your mind to consistently refocus, which is interesting too.
Yeah. So the idea is you can use, yeah, breath, touch, sound, simple things that are physical sensations. And just 10 seconds at a time, you can do this. And when you are doing this, you are actively lighting up that part of your brain that's associated with the sage and shifting a little bit out of the saboteur brain. Now, I'll say when you're really hijacked and super stressed, doing this might not pull you out of it. But the more you kind of cultivate that ability, the easier it is to kind of shift out of it. And what I love about this is it is actionable. When I'm driving, I'll often, like, my PQ rep is feeling the stitching on the steering wheel. I'll focus on that. or I can focus on my breath. Or if I'm doing the dishes, I'll focus on the temperature of the water or the touch as I'm doing the dishes. So there's all these kind of ways you can weave in mindfulness and these PQ reps to everyday moments that you can do in the heat of the moment as well, which is why I really like it. So in presentations like this one, I might be doing this that you can't see just to like ground myself. Before a lot of my client calls, I'll do a minute of this. I often do this with clients in my coaching calls. But there's a lot of ways you can kind of weave this in. So it becomes a lot more operational than saying in the middle of a stressful meeting, like, hey, I'm just going to go meditate for like 20 minutes. Like you don't necessarily have that. So it becomes a little bit more actionable and helpful in that way. So what's actually happening and why is the PQ rep so helpful? So we talked about the judge getting triggered and the saboteur response. So what's happening in our brain is an event happens and we respond to that event, and information is traveling through our brain through these kind of networks. And the information travels down an axon, and then it will kind of usually split into a different path. And over time, our learned responses and emotions will kind of follow a normal path. So when something stressful happens or a challenge comes up, we usually drop into that saboteur side of our brain. Fear, stress, guilt, whatever the emotion is, we drop into that kind of saboteur response. And what PQ reps can do is it's a chance to slow down a little bit and gives you a bit more of like a decision point. So before you just drop straight into saboteur mode, you step back, you have this moment of kind of awareness. It's like, oh, I'm in saboteur mode. I'm feeling a negative emotion. I'm feeling stress. You can do a PQ rep for a minute or two or less. And it might be just enough to kind of shift you a little bit more to the sage. And over time, that automatic response that was more of a highway going to the saboteur because it was just such a well-used channel, that starts to weaken, and you build up more of a pathway to the sage. So just like building a muscle at the gym, you're slowly building that pathway to the sage. The more you do PQ reps, the more you address that self-sabotage, the more you're able to shift to seeing this other way and moving forward in a way with different emotions. And that's why it's just this ongoing, long-standing practice because, as you said, Doug, like it's great when things are going great, but then when you move back into stress, that muscle's not quite there quite the same way. And it does atrophy a bit over time. Like it doesn't happen immediately, but a lot of what I share with clients is like the best time to prepare for war is when you're in peacetime. So like build up and proactively build that capacity now. So when it does come up, you're better prepared. And I had one, I find it comes in jumps, just in my own experience, where I've been doing this for years and it feels like nothing's happening. I'm kind of doing this mental fitness practice for a long time. And then something will happen and I'll just respond differently. And I'll kind of stop after and be like, that was weird. Like I definitely didn't respond like I used to. And I find it kind of comes in these little jumps where, and a very specific memory for me of this was, I had an HVAC cleaning business, and we had Mercedes Sprinter vans that would go out and do the work for clients. And they're pretty expensive, nicely kitted out with all the equipment in the vans. And one of them caught fire and just like pretty much burnt to a crisp one day. Technician was totally fine, but our general manager called me and told me, and I think a couple of years previous, I would have just dropped straight into saboteur mode and would have been like, one, extremely stressed that our nice production van was down, but also angry and like the impact that was going to have on the business and our ability to produce revenue and stuff like that. But I just had this response. I was like, oh, that sucks. What are we going to do? And I didn't have nearly the same kind of negative emotional response. And it wasn't until like an hour later that I was like, wow, that was weird. Like that was very different than what I would have done before. So I find it comes in these little like step changes. I think we touched on this a little bit already. Um, Again, it's kind of taking the root form of meditation and mindfulness to make it more actionable, more applicable in different situations that you can do in meetings, or before meetings, or with your kids, or as you're doing the dishes. Um, I find doing it with my eyes closed, I'm better able to focus. But I have been working on doing open eye ones where you actually just visually focus on something, and look at the color and the shape and the texture, and that can be helpful. Um, the other reason mental fitness is different from meditation is it focuses on identifying those patterns of sabotage. Um, so it starts to address those root level reasons why you find yourself in stress, and some of the patterns that you fall into, whether it's procrastination with the avoider, or one of the other common ones is the controller, with like a high anxiety need for control over situations. And when you're able to address those longer, bigger standing patterns, you're better able to navigate through them in the future. Whereas meditation doesn't really address those kind of blind spots. So to kind of bring this home, if you're feeling negative emotions, stop and notice that you're in saboteur mode. Do some PQ reps to quiet that saboteur side of your brain and activate a bit of the sage. And again, it might not be massive. It might just be a little bit, but it will. Assume the sage perspective that every problem can be converted into a gift and opportunity, which just cracks the door open a little bit more that there might be something positive here, or that it's not all terrible. And then you generate that gift by using the sage powers, which are the strategies that I talked about, but we didn't get into today, which allows you to tap more into empathy, curiosity, creativity, and laser focused action. And another question that often comes up is it really possible to shift from saboteur to sage in really tough challenges? And the answer is yes, but it depends on the speed and depth of the shift, depending on your mental muscle. So if you've cultivated your capacity, you've been doing this a long time, you have those tools and that skill set, bigger and bigger, you'll be able to match and meet bigger and bigger challenges with more ease. Whereas, let's say a big challenge hits you, it might be out of the zone of strength. So when you go to the gym, you build up your capacity to lift heavier and heavier weights. It's the same thing here. You're building up your capacity to handle those challenges with less and less stress. And a big thing to drive home here is, as much as this presentation and what I've chatted with is very much insight based, lasting positive change needs that mental muscle aspect. So a lot of personal and professional development. I read a ton of books and they're great. I learn concepts, but in the heat of the moment, we usually can't grasp them quite the same way because we don't have that same like ingrained habitual mental muscle to draw on. And that's what this brings to the table, is it brings more of that mental muscle to that lasting positive change that you want in terms of being able to navigate challenges and deal with challenging people, whatever it might be, from a more positive state. And they found, actually through the research, about 15 minutes a day for 6 to 8 weeks, they can actually see in an fMRI changes in brain activity when you do this practice. And ideally, like going to the gym, you're going back to the gym, doing a bit of a boot camp, that more intense initial practice helps kind of like build up that initial stage of fitness, and then you can kind of maintain from there. So I'm going to pause there. That's kind of the end of the presentation itself. I'm going to give a chance to dive into some Q&A in a second. But just wanted to let everybody know that we are inviting people to join a mental fitness program that I run. It's 8 weeks long and builds on everything I kind of just went through. Focuses on building those mental muscles, and there's weekly hour videos that gives more context. But what I really like is it has an app that drives mental fitness practice throughout the day and kind of keeps you accountable to building that habit. So if you're curious about that at all, we'll have an email with a bit more info about that. But I just wanted to kind of state that before we shift into some Q&A. That's the presentation.
Okay.
Well, I have one question. I'm curious, Fife, for you. I mean, you mentioned after the vehicle fire, like you just sort of noticed one of those, in your case, one of those jump steps. For you, like, what do you think ultimately contributed to that? Like, what allowed you in that moment to be able to react the way that you did?
I think there's a lot of different components to it. I mean, people that don't go through mental fitness, just through exposure, we've become more able to deal with challenges. So like the more you go through your career or life, you deal with challenges, and just that exposure alone builds more capacity to deal with those. I feel like the mental fitness has helped speed that up so that I'm faster at recognizing if I am going to shift into that saboteur mode. In that case, I just kind of went straight to like, something has happened. I can't change that. Not that there's a gift in our van catching fire, but like, okay, what are we going to do? Like, what's the opportunity here? How do we move forward? And I found that over time, even with my wife, it's interesting how quickly we are shifting to what's the gift and opportunity here. Our kid's sick. Oh, that sucks. Like, it could just be like, this just ruined our week and our productivity at work. It's like, what's the gift? It's like, we got to spend more time with her. She stayed home an extra day. We were doing some potty train. Like, it just shifts how you see the world. And I find that is a muscle that I'm responding to faster and faster. And I see it with, like, I have some friends that are more, they'll just drop more into that saboteur state. And I kind of want to just like, there's opportunity here. Like, why can't you see this? But I can't force that on them. But it's interesting how quickly I can just jump to that. But yeah,
Thanks.
that'd be one aspect.
I just had a couple of comments. One, before you put up the slide about the insight piece, so the pie chart there that you had, that was kind of my first thought was like that conscious awareness that you have to actually realize where you are to make just a change in the decision. And I think that's something that I've gotten a lot better at over the years is realizing, yeah, I might still decide, okay, I realize where I'm coming from. I'm still going to stay there, but generally try to move the other way. And then the other thing that I've noticed is that when something, I actually want more to go wrong on the days that things go wrong, because I actually can take the things that go wrong a lot better. Like if it's just if it's the fifth thing that day that's gone wrong, it's just like I just shrug my shoulders and it just washes over me in much of the way that you had with the fire. Whereas, if I've had like extended periods, months of kind of everything going great, and then something goes wrong, I don't take it nearly as well as on those other days. So I'd rather just all come at once, and then I kind of get through it, and mentally it doesn't. The worst thing will affect me, but the other things that are not quite as bad as that worst thing, it doesn't really take me any deeper than I already am.
Yeah. It's all relative. Yeah.
Finding that this plugs in really nice to a book I just finished, Gap versus the Gain, Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy. And the one thing that I've started, I used to plan my days in the morning, and one of the best practices that they say, you start at the end of the day. So the last hour before. So you say your 3 wins for the day, and then you predict the 3 wins you're going to have for the next day. And then you do 3 things of gratitude. I've been doing it for the last week. And the interesting thing is it's not mental fitness, but it's exercise in my mind. So when I sleep, I'm thinking of gratitude. I'm thinking of my wins. And when I wake up, I'm so much more recharged. So I'm in a really heavy positive state lately. So this is funny that this came when it came through the email. I'm like, okay, that's more. So it was really, really good content. I like the breaks in between, those PQs that you can do, because it's super simple. And I could do that almost anywhere and get into it, recharge and then go forward. Yeah. It's really, really nice content. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Kevin. And yeah, big fan of Gap in the Gain. And it does fit really nicely there. And I think what I love about that, and I didn't really talk about it today, but that celebration of wins is a big part of habit building. So when you acknowledge wins and celebrate them, especially in the moment, it makes it more likely that you'll do the action again. And that's a big part of mental fitness as well, is like when you catch the saboteur, even just catching it, you kind of give yourself a little like, yeah, I caught it. Makes it more likely that you'll catch it again. Or when you kind of shift out of it, that little bit of celebration actually creates a bit more dopamine, which locks it in that that's a habit that you want to have. I think that's what that book is so great at, is it reinforces building on gains versus focusing on what's not working, which brings you more into that saboteur mode.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing.
Welcome.
Any other thoughts? Otherwise, we can finish off there. All right.
It's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being here. And yeah, stay tuned for an email. We'll send a link. It's got two free assessments. One is the saboteur assessment. It probably takes 3 to 4 minutes. And the other one is a PQ score, which is just your current kind of snapshot of your mental fitness. It's kind of based on the last 24 hours. So it's not the most accurate thing, but it gives you a good snapshot of where you might be. And then we'll have a little bit more information on the mental fitness programming if people are curious as well.
Okay, well, fantastic. Thank you for your time.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks
you.
very much.
Take
Okay.
Yeah.
See everyone. Have a good day.
Bye.